Unus Annus has died, but we remain. It ended not with a bang, nor a whimper, but with the press of a button, and we press on, finding meaning in its absence. But what meaning is there in absence? What meaning is there in death? We breathe life into history, we breathe life into death, and with this breath, they shift. Death has shifted from something we are in touch with to an alien idea, something separate from life, from reality to fantasy. Now we must shift it from something we fear to something we love, but not in the necrophilia way. I don't think they assumed that, I'm sure, but some people are into that. Not me. I'm just saying it's a fact that we need to accept, like we need to accept our own mortality. Sure. Today, we talk about our relationship with death, not our relationship with the dead. And we come to terms with our mortality, not come inside those whose mortality has taken them. Please just start the video. Now. First of all, my apologies to Markiplier for this being the wrong kind of spiral. There's only so much you can do with a marker and paper. And I tried to find out what kind of spiral it was that he was doing for Unus Annus. All I could find out was this is maybe an Archimedean spiral instead of a logarithmic spiral. I don't know, he mentioned it during the live stream, but I forgot because it was super early in it. Live stream for what, you may ask? What a good question to pose. Well, it was a little old live stream for something you may know of called Unus Annus. And if you don't know what Unus Annus is, then, you know, you really had to be there to kind of get it. I will not reveal Unus Annus' secrets, as I do not know them, but I will give you the basic rundown of the channel. It was run by a lot of people, but like the faces of the channel were Markiplier and Crank Gameplays. And they had this idea that for 365 days, so for a year straight, they would make a video every day, whatever the fuck they wanted. And at the end of the year, they would delete the entire channel, which they did. And you may ask, like, why would they do this? There's a lot of people who didn't understand why they did it. But it was so that we could recognize not necessarily the imminence of death, but its existence. And the fact that there is a timer ticking for all of us. And we don't necessarily know how much time that timer has. So we need to do the best we can to enjoy and make the most of every single second that we are alive and, you know, doing our thing. And that's what the core message of the channel is about. Whatever they did, it always came back to that. And I personally thought, as well as many others, that this is an extremely inspiring message. And it's inspired me to reevaluate how I approach my everyday, you know, living of life. But it's also inspired me to explore societal attitudes towards death. This is a great excuse for me to talk about Unus Annus, but also to explore something that I've been very interested in for a while. I know it's kind of weird to be like, yeah, I'm super interested in death. Very quirky and cool and cryptic of me. But it is cool and a little mysterious and super fun. I would like to preface this video with a few things. First of all, I will be talking about death. I will not be talking about the morbid details of any singular death or any death in general, but I will be talking about it in a general sense. And I'm assuming you know yourself best when it comes to what will trigger any sort of anxiety or, you know, thoughts that you don't want to have. And if you think this topic will do so, I would suggest that you don't necessarily watch it, because although I am definitely for the idea of exploring one's own relationship with death, you should only do that if it's safe and if you know it's something that you can mentally and emotionally handle. Two other quick things is that the things that I've been reading about are mostly about American attitudes towards death. I know that Unus Annus' fans were from all over the world, so perhaps in other cultures and other nations, the attitude towards death is not the same as it is here in the US. But since this is what I am most familiar with and most interested in because of how it relates to my day-to-day life, this is what I'm researching. And on the topic of research, I am not an expert in any way. I will not be diving extremely deep into a bunch of topics because I have not gotten extremely deep into a bunch of topics about this yet. but I'm gonna get there. And this is just like a nice gateway to like exploring your own relationship with mortality. Very fun. So for my research today, I chiefly relied on this one journal article by Charles O. Jackson called American Attitudes to Death. I will be including a link to it in the description, and also he mentioned a couple other significant literature on death, which I will also be mentioning in the description. I have not read those, but I hope to, as they are important. And in this article, it talks about like modern perspectives on death, but contextualizes it in our historical attitudes toward death, starting in colonial America. So imagine we've got a timeline. I don't know if I can edit this. I'm not the best editor, but we'll see. You've got a timeline with 3 points. The first being colonial America, the second being like 19th century America, and the third being now. So in this article, he describes these 3 timelines, but the 2 major shifts that occur between them. In colonial America, death was very present because, you know, you didn't have modern medicine and vaccinations and things like you do now. So people were dying, maybe not left and right, you know, maybe sometimes left on some days, sometimes right on some days, a little bit of both on other days. But it was there, and people were extremely aware of it. And this awareness did not stem solely from the fact that death was happening at a larger magnitude than it is now. I actually don't even know. I mean, I'm sure at like a per capita death is happening less, but there's a lot of people. We'll get into that in a second. But it's not just because it was around a lot, it was also because death was just approached differently. One of the primary differences between now and colonial America, in regards to death and not other things, is that death happened in the home. And when someone was dying, they had their family around them, but they were like aware of their own mortality and were kind of in charge of the situation and had everyone around them to support them. Not only did they have their family to support them, it was very much a community endeavor, and you would grieve as a community. If one person was lost, it was not just affecting their immediate family, it affected everyone. And something else that's different is death was approached in a very matter-of-fact, morbid manner, so you didn't fluff up their passing. I'm sure that it was just, they are dead, and we are here to accept that fact. That idea, though, is one of the major shifts that occurred from colonial America to the 19th century. Death became sort of romanticized with a capital R, not lowercase r like a necrophiliac might. I suppose, though, that might be sexualization and not romanticization. No, who knows? But romance with a capital R-ish, more like a beautification of death. While death was still primarily like occurring in the home and still a community loss, it shifted from talking about morbid details at funerals to talking about in their memory. It was talked about in abstract phrases and very fluffed up eulogies and things. And this shift could be seen physically too in graveyards, which used to be a place where bodies were just kind of tossed, and they were a public health hazard. And so they were like, we don't want it to be a public health hazard anymore, but they did a lot more than that and tried to make graveyards like very pretty places where you'd put like flowers and cool tombstones. And I think these 2 shifts in the graveyards and how death was talked about were very indicative of the large shift that would come from the 19th century to the modern day, or the 1970s when this paper was written. But I really feel like it can also, it's been like, what, 50 years? 50 years since the 70s. Whoa. But it still very much applies to today. And what happened in this shift was due to a lot of sociocultural changes. I think one of the primary ones being urbanization. Because of urbanization, the sense of community that a lot of places once had got lost because things became a lot more mobile and on the move and on the run, which led to a very detached and impersonal relationship with death, even with close loved ones, because now, because of urbanization and probably because of like health codes and stuff, the home was not the primary place where death would occur. It was usually in a hospital. It's often in a hospital, or perhaps an assisted living care facility, just like under the eye of a doctor or a medical establishment. And death and taking care of the dead body was no longer something handled like directly by the family. It's handled by like a professional undertaker, which further detaches people from death of loved ones or people in their community, and also kind of desensitizes people in that work line. I would assume. I am not an undertaker, and I don't know anyone who's an undertaker. Maybe they are extremely aware of death and it weighs on them, but maybe not. That's something that I would have to talk to someone about. In addition to urbanization, the advances that have happened in science and technology have made it so that we are trying to fight time and fight death, which is, there's nothing wrong with wanting to live as long as you can, but there is something wrong when you're obsessed with outrunning the clock rather than obsessed with living your life to the fullest in the moment. It's like we're trying to outrun something that we can't see or something that is separate from us, when in reality, death is a part of life, not an opposite. I think something that contributes to this that wasn't in the papers, but it was in a TED Talk I watched. I don't remember the name off the top of my head. I will definitely include it in the link in the description. It was talking about linguistics and economics, but it was which you wouldn't think is related, but it mentioned how English is a futured language. I don't exactly know how to explain the differences. The TED Talk does it very well, but one of the basic ideas was like, in other language is, if you were trying to talk about a rain, you would say, yesterday it rained, today it rained, tomorrow it rained, which is not grammatically correct in English. It'd be yesterday it rained, today it's raining, tomorrow it will rain. And the whole thing with futured languages is that the future is sort of seen as something separate. It's not connected to the present or to the past. It's its own entity. And I definitely think that linguistic idea can impact how we view things that happen in the future, such as death. In this article, it mentions that the proliferation of academia on death really skyrocketed in the 70s, and that the amount of research done on it in that period of 5 years, from like 70 to 75, was like more than had happened in the last 100 years. And I think it's because we're trying to reclaim our relationship with death, or rekindle our relationship with death. At least I hope that's what we would do, because we are very detached from it. I know personally I am. And I think right now in our social climate, with things that are going on, big things that start with a pan and end with a demic, have made us both hyper aware and like desensitized to death. It just reminds me of the New York Times article that happened quite a while ago, where it was the first 100,000 deaths in the US, and it just printed the names. Or on the website, it just has all of these little stick figures representing people who passed. And now we have like 11 million cases and more, and 250,000 deaths. And it just doesn't feel real. I think if it did, we would be walking around with a much heavier weight on our chests all the time. And I know that a lot of people are. It's horrible. But I can also admit that I have not faced a lot of death in people close to me, and that I have faced some COVID-related deaths in my family, but not as much as other people, and not as severe as other people have. And even then, it still doesn't feel real. I think to be able to have a closer relationship with death and an acceptance of it in our mortality would hopefully lead to a greater empathy among people in our society. But there's just this large fear of death because it's a scary thing, and then we don't talk about it, it's super taboo, and then we just don't talk to each other. So I know that got a little serious, but things are kind of serious right now. And all of this thought was sparked by Unus Annus. I know some people who didn't really take it seriously. I know people personally who didn't take my interest in it seriously. But I think what the channel did was extremely important. It made me realize and then reevaluate my own relationship with my mortality and how I live my life, and just how it impacts my everyday and in this society. And I think we could all benefit from that realization and evaluation of our own relationships with death. Unus Annus has really inspired me to try and do things like make videos or read books I like or write things I like, and just do what I like. Because if I put it off, there's going to be a point at which I can't put it off anymore because I don't have more time. So this moment, I just want to thank everyone who is involved in Unus Annus. I doubt they will see it because I'm not a very big YouTube channel. But thank you to the editors who put in so much hard work and made beautiful videos. Like, from someone who wants to get better at editing, it's so cool to see everything that they are able to do and what they are able to turn, like the raw footage, into this masterpiece, these masterpieces, 365 masterpieces, arguably. And then to Amy, who was like the creative producer and a lot of the big brains behind the project. It's just so cool. She's wonderful. And it's so cool to see a super strong and creative and passionate woman behind the scenes producing these things, because as someone who loves to create as well, it's like oh, she's doing it, I could do it too. It's good to see representation in, like, especially behind the scenes things where women necessarily aren't always like given the spotlight. And then to Mark and Ethan, who are at the forefront of the channel, just like thank you for going through with this idea and despite circumstance putting your all into it and believing in it and making us believe in it and just giving this wonderful gift to the world, for being super funny and super creative and super inspiring. So yeah, I hope you guys take advantage of every second that you're living, because I know from now on I'm going to do my darndest too. And that's today's video. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see more content. Like this video, share this video, whatever you want to do with this video, do it. Don't hack into my channel and delete it. That would suck. I'm not Unus Annus. I'm not trying to delete my shit. But yeah, thanks, and see you later. Bye.